ballroom was filled with laughter, music, and flashing lights. A celebration of wealth and beauty, the perfect wedding. But when a poor black girl dared to step on that stage, the room erupted in cruel laughter. They mocked her dress. They mocked her presence. They mocked her very existence. But what no one knew was that in just a few seconds, the same voices that laughed would fall silent. The same eyes that looked at her with contempt would soon overflow with tears. Because when she opened her mouth to sing, heaven itself seemed to descend. This is the story of a girl the world tried to humiliate, and how God himself lifted her higher than anyone could imagine. Stay until the end, because what happened that night will leave you breathless. Before we continue, I'd love to know where you're watching from today, and if you're enjoying these stories, make sure you're subscribed to the channel. That humid late afternoon, as the sun dipped behind the modest homes of the neighborhood, the tired mailman slipped a golden envelope into the weathered mailbox outside Alana's house. It didn't belong there. The paper gleamed like something from another world, its shine clashing against the chipped paint of the gate, as if it carried a message from a place where people like them were never meant to enter. Her mother, Regina, hurried to retrieve it, her hands trembling with curiosity. "Look, darling," she exclaimed, her eyes filling with hope. "It's from your cousin Miranda's wedding." Miranda. The name echoed like a crown in Alana's ears. That cousin had always been the pride of the family, rich, beautiful, admired. While Alana carried worn notebooks to her public school and helped her mother wash laundry for neighbors, Miranda walked the city streets in designer clothes, her life a display of privilege. Regina opened the envelope carefully, as if unwrapping a priceless gift. Inside was thick paper with golden letters and elegant flourishes. She read aloud, her voice shaking with excitement. "The Morera family cordially invites you to the union of their daughter Miranda with businessman Daniel Vasconcelos." Every word seemed to brighten her mother's face. To Regina, being remembered by the wealthy side of the family meant dignity, proof that they hadn't been erased. But when her eyes reached the bottom of the page, Regina froze. She fell silent for a moment, her lips pressed tight, then tried to move on as if nothing had happened. Alana, suspicious, gently took the invitation from her hands. Her eyes scanned the small, almost hidden line at the bottom, and her heart sank. "Your presence will be tolerated only out of respect for blood." Tolerated. The word struck like a stone to the chest. This wasn't an invitation. It was an insult wrapped in gold. "Mama," Alana whispered, her voice breaking. "They don't want us there." Regina inhaled sharply, forcing a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Don't think like that, child. They just don't know how to write things properly." But Alana knew the truth. That slip of paper didn't lie. She wasn't wanted. She would be endured for appearance's sake, so the family wouldn't seem cruel in front of others. Later that night, while her mother placed the invitation neatly on the shelf like it was a treasure, Alana retreated to her small room. She sat before the cracked mirror propped in the corner. She saw her reflection. Her dark skin, her natural curls tied back with a faded scarf, the worn school uniform she had been wearing since last year. And in her mind, the word kept repeating like an echo. Tolerated. Only tolerated. Memories resurfaced, the time she had been pushed away from childhood games with her wealthy cousins. "Don't touch her," she once heard an aunt whisper sharply. "She's different." Different. That was the word they used. But Alana had grown to understand what it really meant. Unwanted. That night, lying on her small bed, Alana whispered a prayer to the ceiling. "God, if I really have to go to this wedding, please give me strength, because I already know they'll laugh at me." She didn't know then, but the same wedding that seemed destined to humiliate her would become the stage where her life would change forever. The day of the wedding arrived like a storm Alana couldn't escape. Her mother, Regina, had spent the little money they had to buy fabric at the discount store downtown. She stayed up late sewing a dress for her daughter, simple, but made with love. The stitches weren't perfect, and the pale pink fabric wrinkled easily, but to Regina, it was beautiful. "You'll look like a princess, my child," she said with trembling pride as she brushed Alana's curls back and tied them with a ribbon. Alana tried to smile, but deep inside, she felt the opposite of a princess. She felt like a trespasser about to walk into a palace where everyone would be watching, waiting for her to stumble. The car ride was long, and with every mile, her chest tightened. When they finally arrived at the Grand Hotel ballroom, the sight was overwhelming. Sparkling chandeliers, red carpets, white roses everywhere. Guests dressed in glittering gowns and sharp tuxedos strolled proudly, laughing and sipping champagne as if the world belonged to them. Alana stepped inside, clutching her mother's arm. It didn't take long. Heads turned. Eyes scanned her from head to toe. A woman in a sequined dress whispered loudly enough for others to hear. "Who let her in?" A man nearby chuckled, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "Looks like someone walked straight out of the wrong side of town." Laughter followed. Alana's cheeks burned, her stomach twisted. She kept her eyes low, wishing she could disappear. But she couldn't. Every step felt heavier, as if she were dragging chains behind her. She overheard another guest, a young woman with too much makeup and too little kindness, smirk and say, "It's always the same. They invite the poor relatives just so they can gossip about them later." The group around her laughed. They didn't even lower their voices. They wanted her to hear. Alana tightened her grip on her mother's hand. Regina, pretending to be deaf to the whispers, forced a smile and whispered, "Don't mind them, daughter. Just hold your head high." But it was impossible. Each look, each whisper, was like a knife cutting into her heart. At one point, as they walked toward their assigned table, pushed far to the back of the room near the kitchen doors, a waiter accidentally bumped into Alana, spilling a few drops of champagne near her shoes. The guests nearby laughed, one sneering, "Careful, that dress probably cost $5. You'll ruin the whole thing." The laughter erupted again, sharper this time, echoing across the room like cruel music. Alana wanted to run. She wanted to hide. But she stayed quiet, her lips pressed tight, tears threatening to escape. And yet somewhere deep inside, a small voice whispered, "Be still. God sees everything." Little did she know, those same mocking eyes would soon be forced to look at her in awe. The wedding ceremony had ended with elegance, the bride walking proudly in her lace gown, the groom smiling as if the whole world bowed at his feet. Applause filled the church, cameras flashed, and soon everyone moved to the ballroom for the reception. Alana sat quietly at the farthest table, the one reserved for family no one really wanted to be seen with. The smell of expensive food drifted through the air, roasted meats, fine wines, desserts glistening like jewels. But for Alana, none of it mattered. She felt invisible. Until she wasn't. It started with two teenage cousins, boys wearing designer suits who passed by her table. They slowed their steps, pretending to look at the decorations, but their eyes stayed locked on her. One nudged the other and snickered. "Hey, isn't that the poor cousin?" "Yeah," the other laughed, "the one who still wears hand-me-down shoes." Alana froze. She stared at her plate, pretending not to hear, but their voices grew louder. "I bet she's here just to fill up on food. That's what they do, right? Free buffet?" The group of guests nearby burst into laughter. Heads turned again. A woman with diamonds on her fingers leaned over to her friend and whispered just loud enough, "Honestly, Miranda should be ashamed, letting people like that sit in the same room with us." Her friend giggled and covered her mouth, pretending to be discreet. Alana's hands shook under the table. She dug her fingernails into her palms, trying to hold back the tears. Then came the cruelest moment yet. A young man, tipsy from too much champagne, approached with a smirk. He leaned down close to her and whispered with fake sweetness, "Don't worry, sweetheart, nobody's looking at you. Just try not to embarrass yourself." The people around him laughed again, like a rehearsed chorus. Alana's mother, Regina, tried to defend her, her voice trembling. "Please leave her alone, she hasn't done anything to you." But the man only laughed harder. "Exactly. She hasn't done anything. She doesn't belong here. Look at her dress. My napkin is worth more than that. More laughter, this time louder, crueler, spreading like fire across the tables. Alana's eyes filled with tears, but she refused to let them fall. Instead, she whispered to herself, almost like a prayer, God, please, give me strength. Don't let me break here. The humiliation was unbearable. Yet deep within, a strange calm began to stir, as if heaven itself was reminding her. They laugh today, but tomorrow they will bow before what I placed inside you. The reception reached its peak. The chandeliers shimmered above, music filled the hall, and waiters moved gracefully between tables carrying trays of wine and sparkling appetizers. Everyone seemed to orbit around the bride Miranda, who basked in the attention like a queen on her throne. Miranda's dress sparkled with every movement, and her makeup was flawless. Guests swarmed around her, showering her with compliments. You look like royalty. Daniel is a lucky man. This wedding is the event of the year. Miranda smiled, soaking it all in, her pride inflating with every word. And then her eyes found Alana. The smile vanished. Her face hardened, her lips curled in disgust. For a moment, silence fell around her table as Miranda excused herself from her admirers and strode across the ballroom with her head high, her heels clicking against the marble floor like a judge approaching her prey. She stopped right at Alana's table. What are you doing here? Miranda asked, her voice loud enough for nearby guests to hear. Alana's mother tried to answer politely. We came because we received your invitation, Miranda. We are family, after all. Miranda let out a bitter laugh. Family? Don't make me laugh. You think sitting here makes you my equal? You don't belong in this place. Gasps rippled through the tables nearby. Some guests pretended to look away, others leaned in, eager to witness the humiliation. Alana kept her head down, praying silently that her cousin would stop. But Miranda wasn't finished. Look at you, she continued, her voice dripping with venom. That dress looks like it came from a thrift store. Did your mother sew it on her old machine? Her words sliced through the air like knives. Regina stood, her voice trembling but firm. Miranda, that's enough. We came here to celebrate your happiness, not to be insulted. Miranda crossed her arms, raising her chin. Celebrate? Do you even know what that word means? This isn't your world. People like you, like her, she pointed directly at Alana, should know their place. Don't you dare think you can shine where you don't belong. Laughter erupted again from a few guests emboldened by Miranda's cruelty. The bride smirked, satisfied with the spectacle she was creating. Alana sat frozen, her chest tight, her hands trembling under the table. Her cousin's words echoed in her mind like thunder. Don't you dare think you can shine. At that moment, it felt like the entire ballroom had turned against her. No ally, no refuge. But what Miranda didn't know, what none of them knew, was that God was preparing the exact moment where the tables would turn. And when it came, every cruel word would return like an arrow to those who had spoken them. After Miranda's cruel words, the hall seemed to shrink around Alana. The music played, people laughed, waiters continued to serve. But for her, the world had gone silent. She couldn't eat. She couldn't move. She just sat there, staring at the untouched food on her plate, her heart heavy as stone. Every bite of laughter from another table sounded like it was directed at her. Every whisper, every sideways glance pierced deeper than the last. Her mother tried to comfort her. Regina reached across the table, placing her hand on her daughter's trembling fingers. Don't listen to them, my child. People who mock others are only revealing what they carry inside, emptiness. But Alana could not hold back the tears anymore. They slipped silently down her cheeks, one after another. She quickly dabbed them with her napkin, hoping no one would notice. Still, she felt eyes on her. Always eyes. A group of young women at the next table leaned toward each other, giggling as they looked at Alana. One of them whispered, but loud enough to carry, "She's going to cry. Look at her, how pathetic." Another added, Maybe she should have stayed home. This isn't a charity banquet. They laughed again, covering their mouths with fake elegance. Alana lowered her head, wishing she could vanish into the chair. Shame burned inside her like fire. She whispered softly to herself, barely audible, but God heard. "Why, Lord? Why did you let me come here? Why did you let them mock me like this?" Her mother leaned closer, speaking with trembling faith. "Because sometimes, daughter, God lets us walk through humiliation, just so he can later show his glory." But Alana couldn't see it yet. The ballroom lights sparkled above, the music swelled, but all she felt was a crushing silence inside her soul. A silence heavier than the noise around her. A silence filled with questions, doubts, and pain. She tried to hide, scooting back in her chair, retreating to the shadows of the corner table. She wanted to be invisible, to disappear from their world of wealth and cruelty. What she didn't know was that in the middle of her silence, God was already preparing the moment where her voice, the very thing no one expected, would break through that hall louder than any orchestra, stronger than any mockery. And those who laughed at her tears would soon be left speechless. The night carried on with all its luxury. The band played lively jazz tunes, the groom shook hands with important businessmen, and Miranda floated across the room, showing off her diamond ring like it was a trophy. But then, something unexpected happened. The master of ceremonies, a tall man in a black tuxedo, stepped onto the stage with a slightly nervous smile. He tapped the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, excuse me, we have a small problem." The chatter in the room quieted. All eyes turned to him. "The singer we hired for the evening unfortunately had an emergency and won't be able to perform the opening number." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Guests exchanged disappointed looks. The band members shuffled uncomfortably on stage. The groom frowned, and Miranda's perfect smile faltered for the first time that evening. The master of ceremonies raised his hands, trying to calm the whispers. "Don't worry, we'll improvise something. But first, is there anyone in the room who knows how to sing? Even just a little? Perhaps a family member who could honor the bride and groom with a song?" A tense silence filled the ballroom. Guests looked around at each other, but no one moved. Singing? In front of all these people? Nobody dared. Until a quiet hand lifted in the back corner. "Alana." Her mother gasped softly. "Alana, no," Regina whispered, terrified. "They'll only laugh at you again." But Alana's heart beat like a drum in her chest. Something stronger than fear was pushing her. She couldn't explain it. It felt like a whisper deep inside her soul. "This is your moment." The master of ceremonies squinted, spotting the small hand in the air. "Yes? Did I see someone volunteer?" Dozens of heads turned, and then it happened. The laughter. A man near the front burst out, "Oh no, not her. This will be entertaining." Another voice followed. "Perfect, a free comedy show." The laughter spread quickly, bouncing from table to table. Miranda smirked, her arrogance returning. She leaned into her groom and sneered, "This is going to be priceless. Let her embarrass herself, it'll make the night unforgettable." The master of ceremonies hesitated, sensing the tension. "Miss, are you sure?" Alana stood slowly, her knees trembling, her palms damp with sweat. But her voice, though quiet, carried surprising strength. "Yes, I can sing." The room erupted in more chuckles and whispers. Some guests shook their heads in disbelief. Others whispered wagers about how badly she would fail. But Alana kept walking, step by step toward the stage. Each laugh behind her cut deep, but each step forward felt like defiance. What no one knew was that the very voice they mocked would soon silence the entire hall. Alana climbed the small steps to the stage. The bright lights above nearly blinded her, and the room suddenly felt larger than life. Hundreds of eyes followed her every move, some curious, most mocking. She stood there frozen for a moment, clutching the microphone with both hands. Her knees trembled so much she feared she might collapse. Then came the first cruel voice, echoing from the tables in front. "Careful, everyone! She might break the mic." Laughter erupted instantly, bouncing across the golden hall like thunder. Another guest chimed in, raising his glass of champagne. "To the brave little girl who's about to give us the worst performance of the night." The crowd roared again. Some clapped mockingly, others whistled as if she were a circus act. Alana felt her chest tighten. Her throat burned with fear. She looked at her mother sitting far at the back, tears welling in her eyes but her lips moving in silent prayer. God help her. Please help her. The master of ceremonies tried to calm the crowd. "Please, ladies and gentlemen, let's give her a chance." But even his voice was drowned out by the cruel chorus. A woman near the front fanned herself dramatically and said, "This is embarrassing already. Why let her ruin the wedding?" Another added with a smirk, "Let's just hope she doesn't faint before she starts." The laughter cut deeper than any knife. Alana lowered her eyes, gripping the microphone tighter, as if it were the only thing keeping her standing. For a second, she thought about running off the stage, escaping the humiliation. But then, something stirred inside her. A quiet strength. A whisper that wasn't from the crowd, but from within. "Do not be afraid. This is the moment I prepared for you." She took a shaky breath, closing her eyes for a brief second. When she opened them again, the room blurred. She no longer saw the sneers or the glittering dresses. She saw only the chance. The chance to let her voice speak for her soul. And though the crowd still laughed, though the mockery still filled the air, Alana was about to release the sound that would silence them all. The ballroom was still buzzing with cruel laughter when Alana lifted the microphone to her lips. Her hands trembled, but in her chest her heart pounded like a drum of war. For one final moment, she closed her eyes. She wasn't in the ballroom anymore. She wasn't standing in front of the mocking faces, the glittering gowns, the sneers of her cousin Miranda. She was back in her tiny bedroom, singing softly while her mother washed clothes in the next room. She was back in church on Sunday mornings, where her voice rose in prayer, unnoticed but pure. And then, she opened her mouth. The first note rose like a river breaking its dam, powerful, clear, and impossibly beautiful. The laughter stopped instantly. A silence swept across the hall, so sudden it was almost frightening. Forks froze mid-air. Glasses stopped halfway to lips. The cruel smiles faded into stunned stares. Alana's voice soared higher, filling every corner of the golden hall. It wasn't just a song. It was her soul pouring out. Every tear she had swallowed, every insult she had endured, every silent prayer she had whispered. It was all there, woven into each note. Her voice carried both strength and tenderness, the kind that pierces the heart and refuses to let go. Even the band behind her stared in disbelief, their instruments hanging silent in their hands. For the first time that night, Alana stood tall. Not because her dress had changed, not because her skin had changed, but because something greater than all of them radiated through her. Miranda, the arrogant bride, sat frozen, her painted smile gone, her hand trembling as she clutched her champagne glass. The same guests who had laughed seconds earlier now sat in awe, their eyes wide, their mouths slightly open. Some blinked back tears they didn't expect. The final note hung in the air, echoing long after her lips closed. And in that sacred silence, the truth became undeniable. The girl they mocked, the girl they despised, the girl they wanted to erase, had just become the brightest star in the room. When the last note faded into silence, the ballroom remained frozen, as if time itself had stopped. Then came the first sound, not laughter, not whispers, but the quiet gasp of a woman in the front row. She covered her mouth, her eyes glistening with tears. One by one, others followed. Men who had raised their glasses in mockery now lowered their heads in shame. Women who had giggled at her dress now wiped their eyes discreetly, their mascara running. The same mouths that had spoken cruel words now trembled with silence. And then, Almost like a wave, the applause began. Hesitant at first, then louder, stronger, filling the hall with thunder. But Alana wasn't looking at them. She wasn't thinking of their applause. Her eyes searched only for her mother, Regina, who stood at the back with both hands over her face, crying tears of pride. Meanwhile, Miranda, the bride who had humiliated her, sat rigid, her face pale. She forced a smile, but her eyes betrayed her. For the first time that night, she wasn't the star. She wasn't even noticed. All eyes were on Alana. Someone whispered at Miranda's table, She sings like an angel." Another replied, "I feel ashamed of what we said earlier." Guests who had mocked Alana now turned to each other, unable to meet her gaze. They avoided her eyes as if her song had become a mirror exposing their cruelty. The young man who had taunted her earlier, the one who joked about her dress, stood up slowly, his face flushed. He clapped harder than anyone else, desperate to mask his guilt. But Alana didn't even look at him. The girls who had whispered about her crying now sat in silence, their cheeks streaked with their own tears. Even the arrogant groom, Daniel, leaned closer to Miranda and whispered sharply, though his words carried far enough. "You humiliated her, and now she's the only one anyone will remember tonight." Miranda's jaw tightened. She tried to reply, but no words came. In that moment, every person in the hall understood the lesson written in Alana's voice. God lifts the humble, and he humbles the proud. The same crowd that once laughed at her now cried in awe, realizing too late that they had mocked someone chosen to shine. The ballroom was still vibrating with the echoes of Alana's song. The applause thundered, refusing to die down, as if the crowd wanted to hold on to the moment forever. Alana stood on stage, her chest rising and falling, her eyes wide with disbelief. She hadn't just sung. She had poured her soul, her wounds, her prayers into every note. And now the very people who once laughed at her were on their feet, clapping until their hands turned red. But the greatest surprise was yet to come. From the back of the hall, a man in his 50s, dressed in a dark suit, stood up. He wasn't just any guest. He was Mr. Howard, the owner of the band playing at the wedding, a man known throughout the city's music scene. He slowly walked toward the stage, his eyes fixed on Alana. The crowd parted like the Red Sea as he approached. Taking the microphone gently from her trembling hands, he spoke loud enough for all to hear. "Young lady, I have been in this business for more than 30 years. I've worked with voices from all over the country, and I can tell you this with certainty. I have never heard a voice like yours." The guests gasped. All eyes turned to Alana again, but this time with admiration, not scorn. "Mr. Howard continued, his voice filled with conviction, "you do not belong hidden in the shadows. You belong on a stage in front of the world. And if you'll allow me, I want to offer you a contract. I want you to sing professionally with my company." The hall erupted again, not in laughter, not in mockery, but in cheers and astonishment. Alana covered her mouth, tears spilling freely. Her knees almost gave out as her mother, Regina, rushed to the stage. Together they embraced, sobbing in each other's arms. The same guests who had ridiculed her now applauded louder than ever, trying to drown their guilt in admiration. The arrogant young man who mocked her earlier whispered to his companions, We were wrong, completely wrong." The women who had laughed at her dress now wiped their tears, whispering to each other, "She's chosen. God himself must have placed that gift inside her." And Miranda, the bride, stood frozen in disbelief. Her perfect night, her crown moment, had been stolen by the very cousin she had despised. Her lips trembled as she tried to smile, but her eyes burned with humiliation. Daniel, her groom, looked at Alana with genuine respect. Turning to Miranda, he said bluntly, "You mocked her, but tonight she's the queen, not you." The words stung Miranda worse than a slap. She turned her face away, her pride shattered. Meanwhile, Alana looked out at the crowd, the same crowd that had once made her feel so small. Her voice trembled but carried a message far greater than herself. "I thank God, because tonight, He showed me that he never abandons the humble. He lifts those the world tries to bury. The hall fell silent once more, not out of scorn this time, but out of reverence. And so it was that the poor girl, the unwanted guest, the one they tolerated only out of respect for blood, walked away from that wedding not as a shadow, not as a victim, but as a rising star. Because when God decides to lift someone up, no human hand can keep them down. Never forget, those who mock the humble will one day bow before their light. God does not abandon the just. He may take time, but his justice always arrives, and when it does, the whole world sees it. Have you ever been underestimated or mocked only to later prove them wrong? Share your story in the comments below.